You need these cards if you want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2025. How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about cards that you're going to need if you want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2025. Now, obviously, you can build a deck with a ton of different options. You can build decks that are more control-based style, more aggressive, more combo-based style, whatever the case might be. But there are going to be so many amazing generic cards that pretty much every deck can use. So today I want to take a look at some of these cards that you're going to need if you want to play at the highest levels. Even then, you can bring these cards to a locals or regionals, whatever the case might be, and still perform very well. So if you're excited for the video, then do me a favor and smash the like button, and of course subscribe to the channel for more. But with that being said, here are some amazing cards that you're going to need in 2025. So first things first is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an expensive card game. There are quite a few different cards that see a ton of meta play that are over $50 in price. But there are also a ton of cards that see a lot of play even though they're less than $10. So what I'm going to do is split this video up into two different price points. I'm going to start off by looking at cards that are at that $10 or lower tier, and then after that I'll talk about cards that have no budget at all. That way, if you don't have a particular budget and you want to play the most expensive deck, that is perfectly fine, and you'll have the resources to do so. Now within that first price point of cards that cost $10 or less, I'm going to split these up into individual categories, and the first one I want to talk about is going to be hand traps. So, what are the best hand traps in the game right now, and what hand traps do you absolutely need in this format? Well, I made a video like this quite a while ago, and the hand traps haven't really changed that much since I made that video. I mean, we have the Molcharmies now and the Dominus cards, for example, but other than that, the main hand traps are still pretty much the same. And in my opinion, there are 5 hand traps that everyone needs to have in this particular format. Those hand traps are going to be Infinite Impermanence, Ash Blossom, Effect Veiler, Nibiru the Primal Being, and Droll and Lockbird. These 5 are definite musts. You have to have them in your collection because they're almost always going to be meta relevant. And if you don't know what to include in your deck, you can usually just use one of these cards. They also have easy access reprints, so there's really no excuse. But there are many more low-cost hand traps that are usually format dependent. For example, in this particular format, I would recommend picking up Artifact Lancia because it completely shuts down Malice as one of the top decks. Fantastical Dragon Phantasme is basically Molcharmie Fuwalas at home, helping you draw cards to boost your chances of seeing more non-engine, and the bestial monsters like Magnamut and Baldrake. I recommend Druisworm as well, but that card is going to be in the no budget portion of the video because it is over $10. Bestials are great because one of the best engines in the game is the Fiendsmith engine, which is completely turned off if you banish their copy of Fiendsmith Requiem. So these are just some of the hand traps that I'd recommend for this particular format if you're on a budget, but I also recommend picking up a few more hand traps for future format. Specifically the Ghost Sisters like Ghost Mourner, Ghost Belle, and Ghost Ogre. There are so many more amazing hand traps, but I'm not going to talk about them right now, either because they're too expensive or because they're just not good enough in this current format. But what is really good in this format right now are going to be board breakers, which are usually going to be cards that are really effective when you're going second. But some of them have really nice application when you're going first as well, and usually that's when you get the best ones. In my opinion, board breakers are amazing in this format, and some of the best ones are going to be Ultimate Slayer, which is a great answer to a Rizal endboard. You simply send a copy of Myriologic Aggregator to the graveyard to shuffle back a copy of Detonator, and then you can use the effect of Aggregator to negate the Rizal Cross on field to protect your plays, and you get all of that from just one singular card. I also really like Book of Eclipse as a great option for going first and for going second. When going first, you can shut down your opponent's plays and it forces them to Ash Blossom on their turn and not on yours. And when you're going second, you can turn off any deck that isn't using Link monsters. The one problem with this is that obviously Malice is in the format and is very good, so you have to use it when you're going first against that strategy. Triple Tactic Talents is a great card in this format. Not only is it very good when going first, but it's also great when going second. When going first, you can use it to look at your opponent's hand and gain full knowledge, or you can even use it to be able to draw additional cards to find your combo pieces. And when going second, you can use it to steal your opponent's monsters to either link off with, but more importantly, turn off a really powerful piece of disruption. For example, you can steal a copy of Detonator or Terahertz, which are going to really weaken 2 of the best decks in the format. In my opinion, you should be playing Triple Tactic Talents in almost any deck. The same goes for Triple Tactic Thrust. This card is also amazing, and because of Rarity Bonanza, the card has become a lot more affordable. The cheapest copy is now about $10, which means it is in that budget that we had set at the beginning of the video. Going first, you can set powerful spell or trap cards against some of the best decks in the game, specifically cards like Dimensional Barrier for Rizal and cards like Artifact Sanctum for Malice. And going second, you can find the right board breaker to win in the right situation. Oh, you need to search for Harpy's Feather Duster, you can use that. You want to search for a copy of Bonfire, that works too. MattOshea is a bit of a weird one because it only really works if you're playing the right cards for it, kind of like Ultimate Slayer, but usually you want to use MattOshea for the mirror match. So if you are playing Rizal or a deck that plays the Fiendsmith cards, then I would highly recommend using MattOshea in your strategy. There are so many other amazing board breakers, but they're not necessarily going to see a lot of play in this format because they aren't the best ones, but you should have them in your collection nonetheless. So here are some of the best board breakers rapid fire. Evenly Matched is fantastic at getting rid of almost all of your opponent's resources. Forbidden Droplet can barely be responded to and is negation and attack reduction. Cosmic Cyclone is a great choice to get rid of pretty much any back row card, as well as Harpy's Feather Duster and Lightning Storm for mass back row removal, and Super Polymerization is a card that, when it is played correctly, can be game ending. Each of these cards have their pros and cons, but you're better off having them than not, even when the format isn't actually useful for it. Moving on for cards that you need in the extra deck. Now this can be a little bit tricky because most of the time the extra deck is reserved for cards that we need for our actual engine. For example, if you're playing the Fiendsmith cards, you definitely want to have a copy of Fiendsmith Desiree, but not every deck is using those cards. That being said, here are a few generic extra deck monsters that you should have in your collection for when the time comes. Starting off with the fusion monsters. Obviously you would need your super poly targets like Muddragon of the Swamp and Garura Wings of Resonant Life, which are both great choices and the main two super poly targets. But Predaplant Dragostapelia is also a great choice even though it doesn't come up that often in this format. I also think you should have Elder Entity Entis, which you'll never summon, but you will use as a target for an Nadir Servant. Necroquip Princess is a very affordable card that you should have access to for when the Fiendsmith engine gets reprinted. And finally is the Magic Sausage, Magistus Torozo, which is being released in Supreme Darkness. But why though? Well, you can summon it by contact fusing a spellcaster monster with a Link, Fusion, Xyz, or Synchro monster. This means that any deck now has access to a level 4 for Xyz plays or a level 4 tuner for Synchros. Speaking of Synchros, I recommend picking these ones up. Chaos Angel is incredible, and I know it's more than our budget, but it's such an easily accessible card that you should have it in your collection if you can find one at a cheap price. Enigmaster Packbit is a great card to send off of Ultimate Slayer or Nadir Servant, but you're barely ever going to actually special summon it. F.A. Dawn Dragster is a spell and trap negate, while Cyphering Lord Omega is a degenerate card that hand rips the opponent. And Herald of the Arclight is a great card for any ritual strategy, including Voiceless Voice and Mitsurugi. There are lots of good Xyz monsters in the format today, but the one that everyone needs regardless of their deck is easily going to be Myriologic Aggregator. It's great in Rizal and against it too, but keep in mind there's only one printing of the card as a super rare in Darkwing Blast. Rank 4s though are incredible this format, so let's just get them all out of the way. The main ones in my opinion are going to be Baguska the Terribly Tired Tapir, which shuts down any non-Link deck. Abyss Dweller turns off the graveyard and does wonders against Mitsurugi. Evil Swarm Exciton Knight is a great equalizer and just so happens to be a light fiend monster for the Fiendsmith engine. And King of the Feral Imps is amazing if you are playing Mitsurugi yourself. Number 90, Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord is a monster negate on a generic rank 8 body, and Divine Arsenal AA Zeus Sky Thunder is an elite card. While Super Star Slayer Typhon is one of the best cards against Rizal decks, even though it's over our budget. And for as many good Xyz monsters there are tons more amazing Link monsters. Starting off with the Nightmares, but most importantly Nightmare Phoenix and Unicorn. The Charmers, specifically in this format, Dark and Lina, are great. IP Masquerena is seeing a little bit less play but is still a good card, and SP Little Knight is officially a budget card. If there's any card in this entire video that you should pick up, it's going to be SP. It's one of the best cards in the game. Period. Silhouette Rabbit is also a really interesting endboard piece for some decks, and I'd also grab Promethean Princess, even though fire decks aren't really in the format right now. Access code Talker lets you OTK2 and is super affordable as well thanks to Rarity Collection 2. So far I've spent the majority of the video talking about cards that are under $10, but for the rest of the video I'll be talking about cards and engines regardless of their price. Starting off with some of the best engines in the game today that I believe everyone should have access to if you want to have the ability to play pretty much any deck. The Sky Striker engine is incredible. Specifically, you're going to have cards like Engage, Widow Anchor, Hornet Drones, and Kagari, allowing you to dig deeper into your deck, but also steal opponents' monsters and get free Link bodies. The Fiendsmith engine is the best engine in Yu-Gi-Oh! And yes, a single copy of the Fiendsmith Engraver is like $100, and if you can afford it, great, you're going to have an amazing start to your deck building journey. But if you don't have it, it's not the end of the world because you do have other alternatives. One of those alternatives is going to be the Azamina engine, which is not as good right now, partly because Detonator is in the format. The best starter in the deck is going to be Deception of the Sinful Spoils, which is a continuous spell that tributes a monster for cost. So if Detonator just uses the effect to pop that card, it won't resolve, and because of that, you'll be out of your ability to search a card, and you'll be down 2 cards yourself. However, if it does resolve, you end up with an Omni Negate and so much more. Finally, we have the Kashtira engine, made up of Unicorn, Birth, and Fenrir. These 3 cards are fantastic and force your opponent to play in a really awkward style of play to avoid their banishing face down effects. But what are some other really cool cards that pretty much everyone should have in their collection regardless of price? Well, first off, you're going to definitely want a copy of Dimensional Barrier. This card is incredible at stopping so many different strategies, and you definitely want to have it in your collection. Destructive Daruma Karma Cannon is another great card to send off of Triple Tactics Thrust and can shut down a lot of different decks. Pot of Prosperity, Extravagance, and Desires allow you to dig for additional cards and get your deck more consistent, while Called by the Grave and Crossout Designator allow your plays to actually resolve. Nadir Servant and Dogmatica Maximus are going to see a ton of play now that Mitsurugi is in the format. Artifact Sanctum is what you would set off of Triple Tactic Thrust if Malice were to interrupt you. You can then use it to be able to summon out Artifact Lancia from the deck and tribute it to be able to stop your opponent from banishing cards. And of course, Solemn Strike and Solemn Judgment are 2 amazing cards when going first. I'll wrap this up though with 5 last cards. These 5 cards are incredible, and if you can afford them, you should have them in your collection because they allow you to play pretty much any deck you could possibly want. Those cards are going to be Dominus Impulse and Dominus Purge, Mulcharmy's Fuelos, Perulia, and Meows. These 5 cards, like I said, are incredible and give you the most amount of flexibility when deck building because you have your non-engine pretty much set once you have these cards. But again, they are so incredibly expensive, so if you can't afford them, just wait for the reprints. But that's it, that's almost 100 cards I've talked about in this video, and there are so many more incredible cards. So if you see a card that I did not mention in this video, then make sure to put it down in the comments below. I'll make a pinned comment with some of my favorite suggestions that I see in the video. Leave a like if you haven't already, comment what other videos you want to see next, subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.